Hello. This is going to be a relatively medium length review. We're going to be talking about The Running Man by Stephen King, or Richard Bachman, whatever he calls himself this week. Um, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm kind of up in the air about this book, whether it's great or not, but I'll explain that later. Anyway, let's start with the plot. The plot is kind of simple. In the near-ish future, say about maybe 50 to 70 years from now, a fascist regime has taken over the United States, and it uses the poor to place them into what's called the games to basically these are truly sadistic, game shows where they kill people, they torture them for money because the economy is so bad that the poor need to actually, you know, do this just to get enough money to survive. Into this, we see Ben Richards. Ben Richards is our main character. He has a wife and a very sick daughter. He needs money. His daughter needs some, medicine. She has pneumonia. So he enters the games figuring he'll get at least a little bit of money, and is chosen for their most popular game called The Running Man. The Running Man is a game where they choose one person, and he has to try and avoid capture or being killed. And for every hour that he avoids it, he wins $100. And if he is able to avoid capture or being killed for a whole month, then he wins $1 billion. Sounds great. Really hard because that means everybody in the whole country is looking for him. Because if you give a tip to where he is and it turns out to be true, the person that gives the tip gets money, and and obviously, it's a way for the rich to kind of pit the poor against each other. There, yeah, that it's so. I mean, it's a really difficult game to win. So what is this book about, really? Because I mean, that's a relatively simple plot to write, and done badly, that plot could be really easily done badly. It could be just a straightforward action adventure. It could be really stupid. But really, what this book is about, it's about class consciousness. The the rich are using the poor as cheap labor, as a form of entertainment, and plus, obviously, like I said before, the way that the rich remain popular is they pit the poor against each other. They say, "Hey, you know what? If you turn the person in, we'll give you money." And obviously, every one of the poor is so poor that they need the money to succeed, to exist. So the poor can't trust each other, and the rich just use them for their entertainment, for their playthings. So obviously, what this book is trying to get at is a certain amount of like class consciousness and class warfare about the haves and have-nots, and how the haves tend to try and use the have-nots as their own personal toys. Uh, so that's really what the book is really what this book is playing with. Now we get into, what do I think this book is about? How do I think this book is worth reading? Sorry, I don't know. Taken on its own, I don't like this book. It really breaks down into two halves. There's one half of it of Ben Richards getting chosen and starting his run, and then there's another half of him slowly becoming more conscious of the class divisions. And I think one of the problems with this book is that, being a relatively short book, like about maybe 250, 300 pages, it really doesn't succeed in that switch between Ben Richards being, just wanting the money to wanting to deal with this class divide. It happens too quickly. I mean, you had Avatar: The Last Airbender that had Prince Zuko, and they spent an entire season on taking Prince Zuko from being a main villain to being one of the most interesting and deep, good guys in the entire series. And in this book, it takes about 20 pages. Just happens a little bit too quick for my taste. On the other hand, I do have a thought. Basically, this book is a companion piece to The Long Walk, and as such, it kind of plays as a sequel to The Long Walk. If you'd have The Long Walk in the first, like, say, 30 years of this fascist regime, this, The Running Man would take place maybe another 20 years past it. And as such, it expands that world a lot and shows how the fascist government that has taken over the US has ruined things over time. And it shows probably the absolute zenith of the power of that regime. And so, I mean, I'm not sure I should judge this book completely on its own. It should probably be considered on with other criteria. And as such, I mean, it does expand the universe of these books a lot. It does add a lot more weight to what's going on, and it actually moves that story along more than just the story in the book. Of course, then there's the other problem. There should have been a third book if Stephen King was trying to do this, where you have The Long Walk, as like the early stages of this fascist regime, The Running Man as like the middle and like the height of the power, and then you should have had like a book after it where the government is like trying, desperately trying to retain control of the populace. I don't think we ever got that. So, I don't know how to actually review this book. There should, like I said, if you want to read this book, it's actually well written, but it still feels where The Long Walk felt like, it was Stephen King really wanting to write about this story. This book kind of felt like I just need to get a book out. if that's the best way to put it. The main character, Ben Richards, never really grasped me as a guy that I really wanted to spend a whole lot of time with. He was interesting, but there is a difference between a person who is world weary and kind of rebellious, and then there's another thing for a story where it's just constantly that, and it kind of starts to feel one note. To a certain extent, the book adds a little bit more meat to his bones towards the end. That's still a little bit too little, too late. So, myself, I would say read this as a companion piece to The Long Walk. Read it if you really want to be a completionist about everything Stephen King wrote. But if you're just looking for a singular book, probably it's one you can kind of miss. So, take that recommendation, for what it's worth. I mean, it does. I mean, these two books, the Long Walk and The Running Man, certainly have a lot of stuff to say about art. Well, in all honesty, about the U.S. in 2025. We're not quite down that as far down the road as these books depict, but thankfully. But I mean, it does have a lot to talk about. But at the same time, you could probably derive the same opinions by just rewatching Babylon 5, and be a lot more enjoyable. But I hate to give a Stephen King book such a meh review, but that's just the way I feel about it. I don't feel that it holds together nearly as well as some of his other books do. I will say the end, and I'm not going to give away the end, but in post 9/11 America, it is somewhat shocking. But shock factor only goes so far. Um, but I mean, that's about all I can say about this book. I mean, I liked it well enough, but I don't think I'll ever return to it. Whereas The Long Walk, I think I could actually get something out of if I actually return to it and reread it at some point in the future. Anyway, that's all for now. Stay positive. Bye bye.